Check 1 2, check 1 2. Mic check 1 2.
Hi, comrades. We're going to get started here in like 5 minutes. If you're not familiar with All Power, we have a restroom down the hallway. There's a sign labeled, it's to the left. I apologize, we're actually out of water bottles, but we have cups and we have filtered water in the sink. So if you are thirsty, I apologize for it being so hot in here. There's no insulation and it's just a brick wall, so we kind of bake like a pizza oven. And because it's so DIY and like people built, we can't afford AC. So thank you guys for sitting with us and bearing with us. But please drink water. I'm going to put cups out, and there'll be an area to show you where the filtered water is. It's just to the left of the sink. Okay, comrades. I think some people are still arriving. We have like a pretty terrible parking situation for All Power, so I always like to give it a couple minutes, but I appreciate everyone who got here on time. Yeah, welcome. Tonight is actually the first time since I started teaching this class that we are going to be live streaming it. So don't mind this. It's not going to be facing you guys at all. It's kind of going to be kind of like a Twitch stream. They're going to be able to see the slides and then like a torso shot of me, I guess. Security, we're good. We're good. Yeah, so like I said, there's some water. Now it's at the front with the river. So yeah, if you guys need any water, stay hydrated because it does get really hot in here. But good news is once it starts getting cool, it'll be really cold in here soon. So, yeah, welcome everyone. Is there anyone here who hasn't been to All Power Books before? Oh my gosh, so many. Excellent. Welcome. Hello, friends. Hello. We're All Power Books. We're a community space. We're a communist bookstore. And we're completely volunteer run and community supported. So we rely only on the support from people like you and like me and volunteers like you and like me. Anyone you ever see coming in at All Power working a shift or doing distro or anything like that, 100% volunteer run. We're an experiment in anti-capitalism. So it's working out so far. We're still here. It's been about 4 years. We moved from 2 blocks down the way, and now we're here. This is actually one of our co-founders leaving now, so everyone say bye, Gage. Gage also does all, if not, well, most of our graphics. We've had like 2 that he didn't do, so Commandante. Yeah, what else? Yeah, we have all of the purchases of merch and books goes directly to support our programs, and we have a couple really cool programs. We do a free grocery distribution every Saturday, heavily inspired by the Black Panther Party and their 10-point program. Alongside that, we have an all-power free clinic that serves, I think, 6 different locations throughout Los Angeles. It's like a mobile medic team that consists of doctors, nurses, healthcare workers, and they've expanded now to we have an all-power care team, which is mental health as well. And it's all just volunteers. So these doctors are coming in after working 3 12-hour shifts in a row, and then they're going out to Skid Row or Chinatown or even here at All Power Books. We have an all-power musicians organization that is for musicians and cultural workers. I come from the music industry, so I am not really, what do you say? I'm not like a professor or a teacher or anyone who's ever studied economics like professionally. I'm a working class person that comes from touring with rock bands, and I'm self-taught. So we all have just kind of stepped into a role that we saw that we needed. And so I'm here, but I'm learning alongside you guys, and I think that's the beauty of having this like working class guide, is because all of us can learn and help each other. The reason why we have this class is really important to us to give people a physical space to learn concepts like socialism and communism, things like this, because I don't know about you, but I'm like scared of Twitter. Twitter's scary, and if you're really excited, you learn something new, and you're like, I'm gonna go see what the world thinks of it. I'm gonna shout it to the world. You're gonna get bullied pretty quick, and we wanted to create like a safe space for people to be able to like ask questions. And so I want to let you guys know, like first and foremost, this is a place for you to feel like you can ask those questions that you're maybe afraid of like posting publicly for the world to see. We're here to walk you through it. Yeah, this is just a place for us to kind of come together and learn these concepts. So we'll get right into it. If you're taking notes, feel free to take notes. If not, I always let people like take photos of the slides. Sometimes that's helpful. I did write a lot, so it's kind of a lot. And these are concepts that, even though they are really like universally like applicable, and they're this is taught at an 8th grade reading level, so it should be easier to understand. They are still like, there's a lot of verbiage and a lot of things you'll hear. Like, I'm sure if you are even vaguely socialist. You've heard the means of production, private property, surplus value, things of this nature. So we're here to demystify that. And so, moving on, starting this off, I just want you guys to know that this is like silly. This is a 101 class. This is like, I wrote this basically for myself because honestly, it was really hard when I was first getting into I was like anti-fascist and I hated the cops, but I needed like more of a direction instead of like burning something down. I'm like, what do we build next? I wanted to make this class silly and open-ended because I didn't go to college. And so when I tried to read about Marxism and people were like, in 1848, Engels and dialectics and all this stuff, I was like, yeah, that's not going to work for me. I was a bottle server. I was a bartender. Like, I don't know these words. So this class is going to be silly. It's going to be easy. We're gonna get through it together, and it's going to be fun. Oh, secondary mention. I usually let people know, we have 5 commercial air purifiers in this space. So we've had the air tested as well. When all the purifiers are on, it's basically like being outside. So I know it's really hot. If you guys feel like you're like, I can't breathe, let these, like, just feel free to your own discretion. But we do have pretty clean air in here, and it is very safe. I think that's everything I needed to go over. So yeah, this class is silly. We're going to go over a couple things. We've got some objectives today. We want to be able to understand society and our history, right? We don't want to just be told what to believe. And I'm not here to tell you guys what to believe. This is not that. I'm not an evangelical of the good word of socialism. I'm here to give you guys the tools to be able to look around the world and analyze it for yourselves. So we also want to be able to develop and build class consciousness, not only in ourselves, but a way that we can bring our peers into this. We want to be able to process and analyze past and present events as they happen. There's so much fucking shit going on right now, and it's so complicated. Imagine being a liberal. Like, imagine. They don't know what the fuck is happening. So we're trying to tighten up our analysis and being able to figure out what's going on. And then we also want to be able to explore how to actually change society. We're not here to just sit back and critique, like, oh, you guys aren't doing Marxism right, or like you know, they're not doing capitalism right. This is capitalism. We're here to actually get involved, get activated, and figure out ways to actively change society. And then if all else fails, I want people to take this class so that they can know their enemy. A lot of the times, you know, we were talking about how Antifa just got designated terrorists. So it's a room full of terrorists. But it's just one of those things where we want people to understand what Marxism is, because it is really, they make sure that it's covered in smoke and mirrors and sounds like this really scary thing. They're like, Marxism is when people have blue hair dye, and when they're, you know, gay marriage is Marxism, or Beyond Burgers or whatever. So we're here to clarify that. So this is a 101 class. For just transparency, this used to be 2 classes. It used to be a 101 and a 102, and they're both 2 hours long. This is condensed, so it's a lot of information all at once. But I figured it was hard. People would go to the 101 class, and they wouldn't come to the 102 class, which was arguably more of the meat and potatoes of it. So I combined it into one. So we're going to go over these foundational terms and concepts, and then we're also going to go over Marxist theories. And I'll tell you what's like the most important things, like if you are taking notes, what's like what you need to know. So we're going to go over like who is Karl Marx, what is Marxism, personal versus private property, means of production, capitalism versus socialism versus communism, and then how those relate to Marxism. A lot of people, you know, they're used interchangeably, so it can confuse people. And we're going to go over Marxist theories. And so the 2 at the top, those are the most important ones. This is what I really want to drive home to you guys, because this will be your own tool to be able to look at the world around you and analyze it and be able to act on those that analysis. It's a scientific method. So the most important things are dialectical and historical materialism. That's what I'm going to be focusing most on today, because those are the tools that are necessary for the world that we live in today. We're obviously going to go over some of his other theories, the labor theory of value, surplus value, alienation, and conflict theory. But yeah, like, why Marxism? Isn't that something somebody wrote over almost 200 years ago? Why are we taking this class? And it's crazy because every time I teach this class, I'm like, oh, that's it. I finally, like, there's no way more people are coming because we teach it once or twice a month. And every single time it's new faces. There are so many of us, and that is so inspiring. If you guys aren't like connected to an organization, I would highly recommend it, because even just being a public space where people come in, they come in from all over the world here. And that like gives me so much hope. And if I didn't have a place like this, I don't know. But yeah, if you guys, I know why you guys are here. You're overworked, you're underpaid, you're frustrated and burnout. Who feels like that? Especially now. When I first started teaching this class, the conditions were even like nicer. Like, it's crazy how bad it's gotten. But the reason we're all here is just so you know, like, you're not alone. There are, look around us. Like, there's all of us here, and there's all of us everywhere. There are so many communists and socialists, anarchists, people on the left who are just trying to fight against capitalism all over the world. We have like 1 million members of the Communist Party in India. There's, why can't I remember the number in China? But just so many people, like 1 in 4 people on Earth are vaguely socialist, just because of the nature of how the population is in the United States versus the, what do you call it? The majority, the world majority. Why can't I think of that term? Yeah, so there's a lot of us everywhere, and they're fighting all day, every day. Pick a country, type in socialism, and you're gonna find a struggle. Right now, there is a Marxist party fighting a capitalist Goliath right now as we speak. The PFLP in Palestine is fighting against arguably the most capitalist, the most colonialist, the most evil entity on earth. And they are informed by the theories of someone who died so long ago. So is it relevant? I'll leave you to decide. But it's one of those things where, you know, people, especially online, you're gonna run into things like, why do we even need to read theory? Why are we listening to a white man from Europe from 1848 or whatever the fuck? You don't have to take my word for it, but other comrades have answered this question. So we're gonna hear a little bit from Comrade Kwame Ture on Karl Marx and socialism.
I must be clear here and not confused. I'm a socialist. One other thing I must tell you now. They confuse people about socialism. Brother the other day said, why ain't no socialist? I said, why not, brother? He said, because it's a white thing. I said, oh, really? You see, Europe tries to make believe that everything that comes out of the world comes out of Europe. I told the man, I said, socialism ain't no white thing. He said, yes, it is. He said, Karl Marx discovered it. I told him, Karl Marx never discovered socialism. He cannot. You call the laws of gravity Newton's laws. I'm sure there's a mnemonic device to help you on your quizzes. But you certainly cannot believe that Isaac Newton can found that a body falls at the rate of 32 feet per second squared per second squared. He can't find this. He can't discover it. He cannot invent this. He can only observe it and record it, discover the law. If I'm sitting in Timbuktu in Africa, and I've never heard of Sir Isaac Newton, and I'm conducting any experiments with gravity, I will come to the same conclusion that he does. A body in motion tends to stay in motion unless stopped by an outside force. He cannot invent this. He can only observe it and record it. Karl Marx did not invent socialism. If I'm sitting in Libya, in the deserts, and I'm doing any research with capital and labor without ever having heard of Karl Marx, I will come to the same conclusion that he did. That any time capital seeks to dominate labor, there'll be a ruthless, uncompromising struggle on the part of labor until it comes to crush capital and dominate it. This is a fact. My history demonstrates that. We came here as chattel slaves for centuries. We fought and fought and fought until we crushed it. Now we're just slave of the wage, and now we've got to rise up and crush that one. That's to declare that Karl Marx didn't invent socialism. It's there for all to see. Karl Marx's great contribution to the world was in the area of historical materialism and dialectical materialism, something you need to know if you know about socialism. But since you don't know about socialism, you don't even know the words. And not only does the enemy keep you ignorant, you stay ignorant. You won't ever go read a book about socialism. Why read a book about socialism? They already told me in my class it ain't no good. You will not even read a book about socialism. Why, you don't even read a book about your history. We come to inspire you to learn. We come to tell you that when you come to serve a people, you must know as much as you can. The more you know, the better able you are to serve the people.
So, like I said, Marxism is a working class guide to changing the world, and it gives us the elements necessary to make revolution by intervening in our lives and engaging with the world around us. So Marx observed social, political, and economic systems. He recorded his findings and theorized their meanings, much like other scientists did, like Darwin, for example, with his theory of evolution. There are limitations and gaps in Marx's work, just like every scientist, as technology advances, as history marches on. But Marx built the scientific methodology and analytical framework for understanding society, and it's been stretched, it's been adapted, it's been applied to many regions all over the world. Marx obviously talked about Europe if you read like Capital or the Communist Manifesto, because that's where he was from. He was working from his own conditions. But he took into account capitalism's global impact. And his discoveries in philosophy, economics, and organizing have informed and inspired liberation movements all over the world. So Marxism actually spread further and faster than Christianity did. It just like, if you go anywhere, like I said, pick a country, pick a city, there's going to be people who have studied or at least have heard of Marxism. So yeah, Marxism has been used as a tool for the oppressed, exploited, and colonized people from South America and the Caribbean to Europe, Asia, and Africa. Amazing, inspiring comrades like Maurice Bishop from Grenada, Thomas Sankara from Burkina Faso. All these different comrades have adapted and applied Marxism to their own struggles. So that's why you'll hear things like a development in Marxism, like Marxism-Leninism, or Marxism-Leninism, Maoism. These are people who have taken what Marx had worked on and developed it and built and added to it. So yeah, countless revolutionaries have defended and developed on the methodology of Marxism to fit their own liberation struggles. So I'm just going to walk through. We see people from Palestine to Asia to Africa to the Caribbean to prisons right here in the United States and obviously in this room. So yeah, many Marxists have added on or compounded Marxism. So who was Karl Marx? Marx was a Taurus baddie, obviously, so he was sensible and hardworking and stubborn. He was a German philosopher of Jewish descent. He experienced, observed, and critiqued capitalism, but what a lot of people, like Kwame said, he didn't invent socialism. Socialism was already a thing that existed. What Karl Marx and Engels did is they took socialism from being this idea, this beautiful idea of what if there were no bosses? What if everyone just lived in peace? And they turned it into a scientific methodology because they weren't interested in the ideas. They were interested in action. And so he totally changed the science of socialism. What else did I have written about him? He understood oppression and stood with the exploited. And I always like to mention that he was just like us. He was just a girl. He had a really healthy distaste and distrust of cops. He hated authority. He was drinking all the time. This was a man of the people. And he's just a really interesting person. So we don't get into him too much in this class because honestly, we don't have time. There's so much that needs to be done. We're about 30 years behind in where we need to be developmentally as a movement to be able to tackle the fascism that we see. So without further ado, we get it. It's Karl Marx. He didn't invent it. He's just a guy, just like us. But it inspires us, right? Because this is just a person. Although he was very brilliant, he was just a cool, chill guy. Can I get a volunteer to read a quote for me? It's pretty short. Don't be shy. We're communists. Okay, excellent. Sorry, front, and then I'm going to have you read the next one. So read this quote, please.
Philosophers have only ever interpreted the world according to critique.
Exactly, and that's exactly who he was as a person and why his theories and the books are still read to this day. And why, even here at All Power Books, we utilize Marxism to develop our own strategies. Because he's not just an armchair philosopher. We're not going to be armchair leftists. We're not going to study theory and not do anything with it. We're going to put it to use and we're going to put it to action. So let's get into it. What is Marxism? So if you were to define it in like one sentence, it is a critique of capitalism, and it's a scientifically informed theory of human society. So it can be like, if you're just doing like a quick, like little quip, it can be defined as like scientific socialism or a material analysis. And Marxism obviously accounts for the entire body of work. There's thousands and thousands of pages and probably dozens of books that he's written and articles and things like that. So it kind of accounts for all of it and the way his methodology in experiencing the world. So I wanted to kind of maybe put you guys in some shoes. If you were to critique capitalism, I want to know, what are your guys' critiques of capitalism? Because I know you got them, otherwise you wouldn't be here. Who wants to go? Actually, you raised your hand earlier. Do you have a critique of capitalism? Okay, passing it on. Yes.
Probably like increasing like wealth gaps between the working class and the poor.
Yeah, absolutely. Wealth disparity, increasing those wealth gaps. Anyone else? Yes? Absolutely. It disrespects Mother Nature by being, look at infinite growth on a finite planet. Yes. Absolutely. It's absolutely alienating and individualistic. It creates all of the problems onto one person, onto each person. Yes. Absolutely. So our comrade said, people are not getting paid what they're worth. People are being undervalued. They're being exploited. No one sees the resources that we ourselves create. The working class does all the work, but the money gets funneled straight to the top. And contrary to what Reagan said, there is no trickling down. It's just going straight up. So that's great. I get it. We're all here. Give yourselves... Oh, actually, one more. Absolutely, people working jobs and not being able to afford the products that they work for. So yeah, we all know capitalism sucks. You guys wouldn't be here if you loved capitalism, unless some of you are cops. We don't know. Who's to say? All right, so moving on. This is going to be where we're going to start to get into it. So get ready. Ready your pencils. Sorry, I'm thirsty. One sec. So, how do Marxists analyze society? How are you guys going to be able to look around the world and analyze what's happening? Oh, Ukraine, Venezuela, North Korea, all these things. What's going on? What's the meat and potatoes of it? Because we're not getting the truth, right? Like, we're not. So I have what's called the Marxist toolbox. It's just an easier way of being able to remember dialectical and historical materialism. These are the ways, and when I teach you guys how to use these terms, those are the ways Marxists analyze society. So we're going to be using dialectical and historical materialism. Every time you see SpongeBob appear on the screen, we're going into a new topic. So, say it with me now. Dialectical materialism. Excellent. Okay. Sounds crazy. It sounds like a mumbo jumbo, but I promise you guys already do this without even thinking. Once you learn about it, you're going to be like, oh, duh, this was so fucking obvious. So dialectical materialism is all about understanding the world by forming arguments, right? Which are based on material and factual evidence. The easiest way to describe dialectical materialism is like, what's the context? Context is a huge word in this. So we're going to break down dialectical materialism into its two parts. Materialism, and it's not like the materialistic, like I'm living in a material world type of materialism. It's more of a philosophical materialism. So it's this prevailing idea that you'll see, and once we talk about this, you guys are going to see it everywhere. It's what bourgeois or like capitalist countries use to like teach history. It's the opposite of what they use. Sorry, I got ahead of myself. Materialism is this idea that like matter or physical things are the substance of reality, whereas like the bourgeois countries use this more of like ethereal idealism, like these ideas. And we'll explain a little bit more of that further. I got way ahead of myself. But it says that everything in the world, including our consciousness and thought, arise out of the world around us. Like it doesn't just come from nowhere. which is pretty big. And this was pretty radical for Marx's time. And you'll start seeing it's actually radical for our time too. And then dialectics is the idea that change happens through the conflict of opposing forces, and it helps us search for truth and analyze contradictions. Dialectics comes from the Greek word dialogue, or to argue. And we're gonna go, because it's still probably kind of confusing, like how do we apply this? We're gonna break it down even further, because like I said, this is a class for 8th graders, so we're gonna go into the basics. Like, what is the material? A material is like tangible items, things you can touch, see, hear, taste, and smell. It's sensuous items, sensuous things that you experience in the world. It's food, water, shelter, interactions, us being in this room, the temperature, the humidity, all of those things. And people have material needs. People need food, water, shelter. They need clothing, they need health care. These are things that people need to be able to stay alive and stay healthy. And with Marxism, you kind of learn that developments in society are actually just a product of conflicts that arise when groups with different material interests engage and compete with each other over these material interests or resources. So, like I mentioned earlier, capitalist or bourgeois societies don't often focus on the material conditions of reality or the material. We are raised to believe in something called idealism. We believe in the ideation of things, to be divorced from concrete material reality of our economic systems. And it's a little bit confusing because materialism you usually hear with like, oh, I consume, I'm a shopper, and idealism you usually hear and you think like, oh, the best case scenario, it's what we're trying to achieve. But these are like philosophical thoughts, so idealism is, I'm gonna explain it right now actually, before I just go off. So what is like the ideal? It's ideas, concepts, mysticism, beliefs, spirituality, religion, these kind of like intangible things that exist around us, but you can't put your finger on and sort of have loose definitions depending on who you're talking to. They're things that aren't physical. So there's a couple different beliefs, or a couple differences between these two camps of like philosophy, where idealism focuses and says that cultural beliefs and ideas drive economic change. So it's how people feel about things, about how, I feel that apples are too expensive, therefore maybe someday they'll be cheap again. Whereas materialism, economic conditions drive cultural change and ideas. We're saying apples are expensive. Why does Jeff Bezos have a yacht? Et cetera. Like, how does this all get organized? Idealists say that ideas shape the world. I had a great idea, let's abolish slavery, right? Rather than materialism saying that reality exists outside of human perception. Reality exists whether we're aware of it or not. It's kind of like if a tree falls in the forest, does it make a sound? Yes, it does. You're not the center of the universe. The other way is like that very individualistic, if I'm not there to hear it, then maybe it didn't make a sound. It's just very individualized versus very communalized. Idealists say that history is shaped by great people with great ideas. Oh, we hate slavery. President Lincoln, thank you so much for everything that you've done. And materialists say that history is shaped by the material conditions of society and the push and pull between classes or contradictions, like slaves versus slave masters, right? So materialism holds that ideas, they're informed by a person's economic, social, and cultural conditions around them. You don't just believe in something because you woke up and you believe in, I can't think of anything, but like you are only engaged with the world around you, and that's how you've been able to make your ideas. How your family is, whether or not you have parents that are still together, whether or not your parents were poor or rich, how you were raised is going to have a huge impact on how you see the world. And that's like very obvious, right? But you would think so, and it makes me sad how much I would think so and how it's the opposite. A lot of people think that ideas were the reason everything exists. Marxists, we focus on materialism because it is a more powerful way to explain things. So when we're studying society or economics or geopolitics, it's important to be able to back up your claims with scientific empirical evidence, which is like Duh. But by looking at the real factors that influence historical changes, we can actually understand how society evolves, and we can start looking around the world and see capitalism as something that is just a part of it. It's just a passing phase, right? It's a progression. So it's not the end of the world. This isn't the end of what we have. Like, it's not the end of history, as they say. Capitalism can be born, it can live, and it can die just like every other system before that. So that's a little bit about materialism in the philosophical sense, which is important because it is a worldview. And I'm going to drive this point so much more home. So if you're looking at me and you're a little confused right now, trust, we're going to go over this for like another half an hour. So yeah, now we're going to go back into dialectics. So again, dialectics is this push and this pull of contradiction. And contradictions are like two opposing forces, right? It's the art of investigating or discussing the truth of opinions, because opinions some aren't based in truth, it's how people feel, and an inquiry into contradictions and their solutions. So Marx obviously goes into a way more scientific, there's like formulas and shit like that, but we're gonna keep it easy. Essentially, it's like two opposing forces that come together and create something new. He goes a little bit more into a thesis, an antithesis, and a synthesis that comes out of it. So basically, when different forces in nature or the material world, when they come into conflict, their interaction always creates something new, right? You're a worker and you're not getting paid enough. So you're either going to find a new job, that's, conflict creating something new, or you're going to fight for your rights. And you might get paid more, or there might be a revolution, or just something is always going to happen when there is a contradiction or a struggle. So dialectical materialism, it says that the material shapes the ideal. So your ideas are shaped by the world around you and how things are organized and how society produces and distributes resources. But it also says that the ideal shapes the material. So it's this kind of cycle. So we're going to start thinking, instead of like pushing against each other, it's this spiral, right? These forces are interactive. But of course, since our world is made up of matter, and we're Marxists, matter will always take primacy over just your thoughts or your feelings or your beliefs about something. Your beliefs about capitalism, they don't matter. What does capitalism actually do, right? So it's this interactive spiral, because before, where Marx came out of, and I'm going to have an actual professor explain this, but most people really thought that idealism was the way. That was like the standard. They were like, oh, you have to have an idea. Once you come up with an idea, then you can change the world. Rather than like, where did you get that idea? So I'm going to let someone with actual credentials explain it a little bit better.
Can you give a brief explanation of dialectical materialism?
He comes out of a school of thought that believed that ideas were the supreme achievement of human beings. Ideas are what you get from the most refined reflection that the human brain can do. If you're religiously oriented, ideas are what you get from God, from the spiritual realm. And so the world is really shaped by something prior to the world, namely ideas. So the notion is, sometimes called idealism, that the real world is the product of ideas. And if you want to really understand the real world, go to the ideas that make it what it is. Religiously, in the beginning, there was nothing. Then there was first God, which is a non-material idea, and that creates the world. Remember, in Genesis, 7 days, God, a spirituality, creates the materiality of the world. Marx rejected that. For him, the material is just as important as the ideal. If you want to see where the material comes from, it's shaped by ideas. But, and here comes his radicalism, it runs the other way too. The ideas don't come from nowhere. They come out of the real world. The ideas we have as people have to do with the real material problems we have as human beings and how we solve them. Where do we get our food? Where do we get our shelter? How do we get protection as little children from the elements, from our parents? All of these real material matters of life and survival are shaping our ideas every bit as much as our ideas shape the reality. Dialectical materialism is the name for a point of view that says, if you want to understand the world, you need to look at how ideas shape the material, but the other way too, and the two interact That's the way to see the world. And for that reason, when it came to explaining the problems of capitalism, he never could and never did suggest it's all because of the ideas of people about capitalism. It's the real way human beings make their food, solve their clothing problems, their relationship problems that shape their ideas as much. And he was going to analyze capitalism through that lens of the interaction of ideas and concrete material reality back and forth.
Okay, hopefully that makes a little bit more sense, but I am going to need 2 volunteers. You can opt out if you want, but do you want to volunteer to read something? Okay, you're going to be reader 1. Can I get a second volunteer? Maybe somebody who hasn't raised their hand? Yes! I'm going to come back to you, though, for sure. Excellent. So you're reader number 2. Reader 1 is going to start on the left side, and make sure you guys project because there are a lot of fans on in the room. So go ahead. Oh no, what did I do? No. Thank you, River. Just click present. How embarrassing for me. Yeah, if you click present and then go down to the bottom and do presentation, I believe. Share, present. Oh yeah, go to share. Sorry. Present at the very bottom left. Perfect. And then click present at the bottom, that big purple button. Perfect. And we're back. Okay, thank you, River. Shout out, River. Give River a round of applause. Okay, excellent. Reader 1. You can start on this side. Now, reader 2. Gosh, give everyone a round of applause. May I ask how old you are? You're 10 years old. Oh my gosh, give our comrade a round of applause. Those were big words too. Oh my goodness. So that's kind of an example of this like dialogue that happens. When you hear something, you go, is that true? What do I know about it? What are the facts about it? And you can kind of go back and forth. And we're going to break it down even further because Marx gets into like this more scientific explanation using what is called base and superstructure. I feel like this might be a little heavy, but just bear with me. I think it'll make sense. So, superstructure is this world of ideas. It's this idealism that we were talking about. It's religion, it's culture, philosophy. Morals and values is a big one, right? It's these things. It's like, what is that? Who decides that? Politics, science, media, education. Science, I don't know if that should be on there, but it's essentially the world of ideas. So the world of ideas maintains and legitimizes the material world. So that's the base that we live in. The base is the relations of production, how resources are divided. Under capitalism, there's a very minuscule few that own the property and then hire people under it. That is a base that we're living in. These change depending on what kind of political or what kind of economic system you're in. So under slavery, the base and the superstructure were different. Under feudalism, the base and the superstructure were different. But the material world shapes and maintains the superstructure, the world of ideas, which it's this spiral that I was talking about. So think about it as a spiral, right? So why this is important is because we know that capitalists run everything, right? They're the ones that own, which we're going to go over, the means of production. They own the industries, the machines. They own the patents, the intellectual property. They basically pay us. It's the owner-worker relationship. And because of that, they're able to shape the religion, the culture, the morals, and the values, what our, like our pop culture is, what the social norms are, how schools get funding, what's being taught. And we're seeing that today with the Trump regime changing, like Turning Point USA is going to be like what kids are taught in school now. That's the base affecting the superstructure. And dialectical materialism, you can think of it as this spiral, but it's not just like one of those hypno spirals that you just look into. It's a spiral that moves forward with history. It's more of like a corkscrew. So I'm going to explain it using some real-world examples. So we've got a base and a superstructure, right? The base is the economic portion, the material portion. So here's an example. It's just going to start playing, and I apologize, it's really abrasive.
Gadgets from Amazon you didn't know you needed.
10 Amazon home finds. You guys know that
Pretty
sometimes
quiet.
Amazon comes in
High quality Amazon.
No. Can you turn it up?
Men's fashion Amazon finds that don't.
Oh, thanks, River.
I just unboxed everything that I ordered for spring fashion from Amazon.
January Amazon bestsellers.
My new favorite Amazon kitchen must-have.
Top 10 Amazon products I've bought this month.
Here are 10 things you need from Amazon this month.
Top 5 Amazon gifts for guys they'll actually use.
Essentially, it's just brain rot, so it wasn't that important to hear it. But essentially, there's this base, right? Amazon is in control of so much. It hires so many people. It has so much of the property and the wealth and the control of the United States. And the superstructure of that, the world of ideas, the fact that Jeff Bezos owns the Washington Post and owns a lot of the, controls what media is getting put out, we're basically living in a world that has been created by and for billionaires, right? We're in this like matrix of the economic system telling us that it's good, capitalism is the best, America is the freest country in the world, all these like ideas about capitalism, which are also going in to maintain and legitimize why we have billionaires. But people aren't breaking out of that spiral, right? It's maintaining itself constantly. The police is a great example, right? We all know we don't need policing. We can do it ourselves. It's so much safer if we don't have that. But this guy's putting out content that is so pro-police and makes people feel like, oh my gosh, that's the only way. What do I do if I can't call the cops, right? And for some reason, because I was just about to cuss, that just reminded me, I'm so sorry I was cussing earlier. I was like, fuck, I have a mouth of a sailor, so I apologize. But yeah, so it's just frustrating that we live in a society that maintains and legitimizes itself. And the whole point of Marxism is to be able to break out of that and to like cut our own path, right? So here's another example of base and
To
superstructure.
anyone I've offended.
Gadgets
It's
from
going to be
Amazon
really
you didn't
loud,
know
so
you
let's
needed.
turn.
10 Amazon home
I
finds.
need an audio
You guys
mixer.
know that
I've been doing
sometimes
this shit on my
Amazon
own, and
comes
I'm like, this is crazy. I'm so sorry. All right, we'll try this one. And also, trigger warning.
I just unboxed everything that I ordered for
He's the worst.
spring fashion from Amazon.
So yeah.
To anyone I've offended, I just want to say I reinvented electric cars and I'm sending people to Mars in a rocket ship.
Nobody voted for Elon Musk, right? Like the fact that this person could put himself into our government and created an entire, what do you call that? Like committee for him is just maintaining and legitimizing the fact that billionaires exist. And what's crazy is people, working class people just like you and me, are putting their lives on the line to protect Elon Musk, which is crazy. But how do they get that way? It's the entire system. It's how it affects us all, right? It's the ideas, it's the culture, it's the morals and the values. I'm sure you guys have seen the obvious shift to the right, the obvious patriotism, country music coming back in a real way. It feels like 9/11 or 2003 all over again. Like back when we first started going to war, way before your time, way before your time. But yeah, it's happening again. And Karl Marx has that quote, first is tragedy, second as farce. It's crazy. We never learn. We, as in American society, not we as in this room, because we know better. But yeah, like the fact that he's rubbing elbows with the president, that all goes into itself. So we need to understand, I think the volume's good now. We need to understand where we are and why we are the way that we are, how we came to be, right? Where would we be if we didn't understand all of that, where we came from, if we're not teaching correct history, if we're teaching idealized versions of history? So that kind of explains dialectical materialism. I'm going to give another comrade, I'm going to be using a lot of TikToks in this presentation as well because it's just easier quips. I could honestly just play back a bunch of TikToks and you guys would probably learn the same. But here's one. This account is pretty good, I would say. I tagged them in my Instagram stories earlier, but it's a great like summation of Marxism. But this is going to explain dialectical materialism.
Dialectical materialism is the idea that material reality shapes ideas, and ideas in turn shape material reality. Here's a simple example. At one point, people needed to transport things faster, so they had an idea. Let's invent the car. But now that we had cars, guess what we needed next? Paved roads, gas stations, traffic laws, parking lots, etc. No one was building paved roads or creating traffic laws before cars. Why would they? There was no need for it. So the material need, faster transport, shaped the idea, the car. And then the idea, the car, changed the material world. Paved roads, gas stations, city planning, climate change. It's like a loop. Your material life creates ideas, your ideas shape new material realities. And this cycle keeps moving. And that's how societies evolve, through conflict, contradiction, and transformation. And guess what? Capitalism is full of contradictions. Mass production, but mass poverty. Food surplus, but global hunger. And this is why we say history isn't random. It moves in patterns, through class struggle, through contradictions, through people realizing, hey, this system sucks. Let's build a better one. So next time someone says, but this is just how the world works, you say, no, this is how it works now. But we make the world. And if we made the system, we can unmake it and build something better. That's dialectical materialism.
Does that make sense? Any questions? Yes. Absolutely. So for people on the stream who, because I don't have the audience mic'd, our comrade said it's a great summation of how to explain it, because so many people go, it's just the way the world is. This is just how it is. This is how it will always be. We can't, they can't envision a better world. But it's not just like likely, it's like inevitable, right? We don't just stop evolving. It's gonna happen. So we're gonna sum up dialectical materialism. And then we're going to apply it. So don't worry. By the end of this class, you'll know. So dialectical materialism says that material conditions shape everything. That's the most important part. Where you are, how you're raised, what country you're born in, whether you were born in in Inglewood versus Beverly Hills, that's going to change how you see the world. And then what media you're exposed to. Conflicts create change. That's the only thing that creates change. Marx said that change happens when there's a conflict or tension between two opposite things. Everything is connected and always changing. Nothing stays the same forever. The world is always moving, growing, and changing. And progress happens through struggle. It doesn't happen smoothly. Sometimes it's 1 step forward, 2 steps back, 6 steps forward, 17 steps back. But it happens. Progress will always happen. And struggle is how we got the 8-hour workday, child labor laws, weekends, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, dialectical materialism. So we're going to apply it now. And that, applying dialectical materialism, is called historical materialism. Excellent. So historical materialism is the application of dialectical materialism to world history and societal development. So you have to know a little bit about how dialectics and dialectical materialism works before you can apply it to history. And that's how we come up with a lot of the answers. That's why we know, I'm going to get into it later, but that's why we know certain things like, with modern events that are going on. So it's the general method that is used by Marxists to understand the contradictions of class issues, we see them as the motor or like the catalyst for social and historical transformation. Can I get a volunteer to read a quote? Yes. All right, read this one, please. Absolutely. And when you start looking at the world in this way, by gosh, was he right. So we know, living in a capitalist, idealistic world, history is presented to us as like this record of wars or, a timeline of good things or bad things that have happened. It's sort of just this flat plane, like, oh, Civil War, slavery, car, Great Depression, Civil Rights Movement, etc. And they're stripped of their true context. Like, why did these things happen? What were the people feeling at the time? What were the economic conditions that created this? we have to understand that different events that happen in society, like wars, like protests, like big shifts in economic systems, they can't be understood alone. It didn't just happen. You know what I mean? Like a lot. Actually, well, I keep jumping ahead. You need to learn about other concepts that led up to a certain event, like social, political, or economic factors. So, historical materialism finds that the development of societies is primarily based on the forces and relation of economic production. And that's super important because before we're taught that it's just how people felt about each other. It's like these ideas or great people, Napoleon Bonaparte or George Washington, and we're not taught like their ideology, what the culture was like, you know, et cetera, et cetera. So that all of that influences thoughts, beliefs, and cultural mainstreams of the time period. We're going to do a very quick summation of world history, just so we can be on the same page. But again, this is world history in like 2 minutes. So please, if you like all of this that I'm going over, just know that there's probably a book this thick that goes way more into it. And yeah, we have them. So look into it more. And yeah. Look into it for yourself, obviously. I don't want you guys to just take my word for it. For the majority of human history, people lived in communal societies without classes. They shared resources and they cooperated for survival. The use of tools and cooperative labor shared by all define this like hunter-gatherer primitive stage of history. Items were shared or distributed by need, like from each according to their ability to each according to their need. And human society transformed pretty abruptly. It transformed when agriculture was developed from a need and from ideas and using dialectical materialism. And with agriculture, a surplus of resources was created for the very first time in human history. And by creating that surplus of goods, societies could now produce so much food that not everyone had to work in productive labor. There was a lot, so you could chill during the winter. You could chill during a certain season. Some people, how did they organize working that out? Who had to work and who didn't? But it unintentionally created social classes, because when some people work and some people don't, depending on their ability too, because when we look at this equation, it's not including like children, disabled, or elderly. We're talking like capitalists, the Elon Musks, the Napoleons, the George Washingtons. So it's those who had taken land by force and then those who didn't. So property was seized through force. It was made private and it was kept from poor people or otherwise marginalized people through physical intimidation, legal means. They started developing laws. They started saying like, this is my land, you can't cross this line. And they enclosed Earth's natural abundance behind a paywall. And that is what Marx calls primitive accumulation. Yes, we have a question? Absolutely. Absolutely. So it started creating a ton of conflict, right? And it's crazy because I'm sure, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Adam Smith. He's like the Karl Marx for capitalists. But Karl Marx critiqued Adam Smith and not only was Marx like a Taurus and he was really poetic and really cool, but he was also really sassy. And I had on my notes somewhere, he was mad at Adam Smith because Adam Smith was talking about how the people who started getting property and who had all this stuff, they just worked harder. And we hear that to this day. So the people who worked harder are the ones that deserved it, and the lazy people were the ones that just miraculously ended up without property or, slaves and things like that. And Marx called that like insipid childishness or something like that, which I thought was such a good diss. But it's true, because he's like, you left out war, you left out like all of the force and the laws and the legal means, you left out all the context. And so that's kind of the inherent difference between like capitalists and then like people Marxists who use science and context to figure out why things are the way they are. I don't think Elon Musk works any harder than any one of us in here. In fact, I don't think he works at all. And so that had to have been true with the kings and the queens. Those people were so soft. Are you kidding me? Like, they did not do a lick of labor. So I'm going to have, again, we had Professor Richard Wolff explain dialectical materialism to us. He's going to kind of explain, there's always been these, like, the clash of the classes through each economic system. So throughout history, I'm going to do a little bit of an example, but throughout history, if history on a line was this long, humans lived communally for all this time, and at the very, very end, if you're looking at it just like, you know, marked down, just right here is where agriculture got developed, capitalism became a thing, and class, all the things that come along with class society, just this very, very tiny little end of human society. So all of this time humans had developed and evolved and built off of this communal nature with each other, and only artificially, after enclosing a lot of the resources, do we have this tiny little speck in history called capitalism. And so that's always good to know too, because people go, how far back does this thing go? It's literally just this big to scale. Obviously, it's not like exact, but it's around the same thing. So I'm going to have Richard Wolff talk about the different economic systems and how there were basically two classes in constant conflict. So here that is.
Capitalism has a lot in common with the systems before, particularly slavery and feudalism. And here's what they have in common. A very small group of people, masters, lords, employers, are dominant, have the control and amass the wealth relative to the vast mass of people, the slaves or the serfs or the employees. This latter group, the majority, the vast majority, do the bulk of the work. The wealth produced is gathered into the hands of and controlled by the small group. A small group vis-a-vis a large group. That capitalism has in common with slavery and feudalism. And that means capitalism is subject to the same tensions and criticisms and revolutions that plagued slavery and feudalism.
So we know that if we're looking at society through a materialist lens, we can see it in different epochs and how how they distributed resources. And so, yeah. Also, this neighborhood gets really crazy at night. That person that like spun out every night, and it's chill. So don't worry. But yeah, so I've got another comrade that's going to explain a little bit about the transition from slavery into feudalism into capitalism.
Capitalism has a lot in common with the systems before.
Capitalism didn't replace slavery and feudalism. It learned from them. The problem with the previous systems weren't their brutality. They were just fragile and inefficient. Slavery made exploitation too explicit. Not only did you have to provide food and housing, but maintaining the system required brute force. And people have this pesky drive for freedom. And feudalism limited your ability to expand your wealth. Your wealth was tied to land ownership, and you're always squabbling with other petty feudal lords, or worrying about your peasants dying in a plague. Capitalism learned from these flaws. Instead of owning people, it forces them to sell themselves. Instead of just owning land, it turns everything, including labor, into a commodity. Now, the ruling class can extract wealth without the burden of direct ownership. No need to feed your workers, just pay them enough to buy food from the grocery store you own. No need to maintain land and provide housing, just privatize everything and charge rent. No need for whips, just make survival dependent on a paycheck, and own the cops just in case.
So we're starting to see how slavery sort of has bled into capitalism, and capitalism will unfortunately bleed into our next system. But we have it overlaps quite a bit. There are still some places that are very feudal. There are still some places that do have slavery. And so these are constant moving cycles of, what do we call that spiral that continuously moves forward. So we know there were different epochs in society: slavery with slaves and slaveholders, feudalism, serfs, and landlords. Capitalism has two camps. We're divided into two opposing groups in constant conflict. There's the proletariat, or the working class. They're workers who get paid to work. They sell their labor in exchange for wages. And the bourgeoisie, these are the private owners of these jobs, and they're the ones who hire us. When we look back on history, we see that conflict between oppressed and their oppressors have always been the driving forces of change, regardless of how we're taught in our history books. So, as conflict arises in history, new forms of society come into existence, and we can apply dialectical materialism to history to be able to understand it better. So I'm going to show you guys how to apply it to history. So we have like the two camps, right? We have idealists. The bourgeois idealists, the Americans, the West, they're going to tell us that the American Revolution was a war of independence for freedom and for democracy against the British. And the reason why I emphasize those words like freedom and independence is because those are idealist words. They don't, what is the tangible thing that comes out of that, right? What does freedom look like? The freedom to choose a million different toothpastes, freedom to choose a couple different chips, and the freedom, this was the American Revolution, what? The freedom for rich, white, slave-owning psychopaths to have no taxes. And a materialist would say that the American Revolution, it was a bourgeois revolution. It wasn't for everyone. It was a bourgeois revolution of white capitalist class from England for the ownership of stolen indigenous land and against paying taxes to the monarchy in England. They were like, down with the king, we want to be free, but only free for themselves. They all had slaves. They didn't want to give women the right to vote, etc., etc. So that's the materialist conception of the American Revolution. Civil War was the same thing. They love to talk about how we're so great as a country because we fought this civil war against slavery. But really, if you do a Marxist analysis on the Civil War, it was a war between two conflicting modes of production, slavery and capitalism. There were southern slave-owning oligarchs and northern bourgeois capitalists, and they were fighting over the colonial expansion westward. Karl Marx actually wrote an incredible article about the American Civil War because this was going on. I just watched Django Unchained, and that was written, the movie takes place, I know it's like a fictional movie, but it takes place like 10 years after the Communist Manifesto was written. So we were still putting people in cages. Like, it's crazy how the United States tries to appeal to the world. So we're gonna break that down even more. Here's an example that you'll hear, especially if you start getting into socialism or any of these things. You're gonna hear these idealist ways to explain things, right? You're gonna hear, communism starves people, it never works. Look at X country, Cuba, Venezuela, North Korea, et cetera, et cetera. A Marxist, they'll tell you, actually, it's not their economic system, because that economic system is actually helping them achieve healthcare and housing, and the literacy rates are expanding for them. But in the reality of the situation is that from our own government's mouth, this is a US.gov webpage here, and it actually says in regards to the sanctions on the island of Cuba, this tiny little island 90 miles south of Florida, that they want to put forward these sanctions, this economic embargo, so they're unable to trade with the outside world, they're unable to get materials, to be inconspicuous as possible, making the greatest inroads in denying money and supplies to Cuba, to decrease wages, to bring about, on purpose, mind you, hunger, desperation, and the eventual overthrow of the government. And if you know anything about history, you know that Cuba was colonized by Spain. There was a war between Spain and the United States for the territory. Cuba gained its independence, and by that we mean that the United States installed someone that was good with them. They created a bunch of plantations for sugar and tobacco, and the indigenous population was absolutely, they were slaves. They didn't have health care, their life expectancy was low, they weren't taught to read, there was no schools. And the revolution stopped all that, and the United States will never forgive them for that. And that is why they're placed on the world's longest and most violent embargo, economic embargo, effectively cutting them off from being able to trade, to get parts. I've been to Cuba twice. I met with the Electric Workers Union in Havana, and they were telling us about how they're unable, because of the embargo, to get parts that they need for their streetlights. They're having to use parts that they've had since the 1950s when they could trade before the revolution, they're having to learn how to make these things better because they're unable to get products and healthcare that they need. That's why they came up with, like, I think 4 different vaccines for COVID-19 because the United States wouldn't trade with them. They were cut off. I went off on a tangent. That's crazy, actually. I wasn't supposed to go into Cuba that much. Love Cuba. Here's another example. This one's pretty egregious, so trigger warning, honestly. I hate this photo. I think it's crazy. But people will say this. Who was taught that President Lincoln freed the slaves? I was in my small hometown. Yeah, excellent. That's crazy. That's crazy. So yeah, President Lincoln didn't want to free the slaves. The slaves freed themselves, actually. That's the actual truth. We're not taught about the multiple insurrections, the assassinations, the strikes, the burning down of things, the violence, that actually made slavery, again, so much more costly to the white colonizers than capitalism. So ultimately, it's just crazy that we're not taught about all these newspapers, how they actually created and organized amongst themselves to make slavery not worth it. It wasn't the culture ideas. What's his face? Lincoln didn't just go, you know what? I think it's time. I think we should all move on and abolish slavery. No, he was put into pressure. It wasn't just one guy. That's the whole thing. They try to make it about one person. It was an amalgamation of everyone in the United States, multiple countries. Karl Marx sitting there critiquing and writing letters with Lincoln being like, you can't have slaves. That's fucking crazy. But yeah, there's just multiple things that go into how history actually works and what we're, the disparity of what we're actually taught about it. This one's funny. My next slide is a little bit more for like the leftists. This is just silly. It's just silly. It's not like a true story every single time, but especially when you're talking to like white Cubans in Miami, it usually hits a little harder. But usually you'll hear this thing where it's like, oh, communism sucks because my family suffered under it. My family, they took my family's house. And you go, what'd your family do? We ran a small plantation in Cuba. We had slaves. It's not a big deal. So that usually, the reason why I put this meme up here is because context really matters. A lot of the times when socialism is trying to be put into place, like when there's a popular revolution that tries to implement socialism, it's always thwarted. It's always put down. Immediately after Cuba gained independence, the United States sent in literally the military and terrorists to do the Bay of Pigs. They failed. Let's go, Fidel. But it's crazy. It's just like, it's insane when you actually start talking this through. It's happened quite a bit. Somebody on Twitter, there's the viral tweet where this girl was like, oh, Mao was so bad, or China, communism is bad because they took my family's business. It's like, what was your family's business? Well, they had the egg monopoly in China or whatever. So you always have to ask who, like, freedom for who? Why were you against a worker state? Why were you against having people get free health care and education, all these things? Because we're going to see that too. If we're fighting for this, there's going to be people who are like, nah, I want to continue to exploit. So again, using idealism, we're often told that we're the greatest country on earth, and that is why millions of people immigrate or flee to the USA. This is an idea, right? But the materialists would say, glances around the room, right? These are just the coups and interventions in South America, I think starting from 1954. But there have been so many US interventions. Anytime the people ever try to take power over their own resources, over their own minds and their own labor and their own destinies, the United States or the West, France, Germany, the UK, they'll always send somebody to assassinate leaders, labor organizers, activists, feminists, pretty much every time. And we're seeing it to this day. To this day. It's crazy. So I'm going to have another comrade explain a little bit. This is another example of using historical materialism when looking around the world. And if you're familiar with anything in the Marxist canon, this is a little bit of an iconic video. It's called Yellow Parenti. So without further ado.
That expropriation of the third world has been going on for 400 years, brings us to another revelation, namely that the third world is not poor. You don't go to poor countries to make money. There are very few poor countries in this world. Most countries are rich. The Philippines are rich. Brazil is rich. Mexico is rich. Chile is rich. Only the people are poor. But there's billions to be made there, to be carved out and to be taken. There's been billions for 400 years. The capitalist European and North American powers have carved out and taken the timber, the flax, the hemp, the cocoa, the rum, the tin, the copper, the iron, the rubber, the bauxite, the slaves, and the cheap labor. They have taken out of these countries. These countries are not underdeveloped, they're overexploited.
So that lecture is pretty iconic. If you go to YouTube and just type in Yellow Parenti, the entire thing is immaculate. It's so good. So highly recommend if you're unfamiliar with Michael Parenti. I don't think we carry his book right now, but he's written a lot of really great stuff. So historical materialism, why it's so important is that it allows us to shed the ignorance of thoughts, feelings, and beliefs to see clearly the cause and effect of world events, both in the past and now, right? And I hate to say it, but like, I think Ben Shapiro said like facts don't care about your feelings, but then doesn't like live by that. Marxists should own that, because truly facts don't care about your feelings. I'm willing to be, if somebody's like, oh, social, there's probably examples of white Miami Cubans that were, actually did have a bad time under communism. But, and I'd be open to listening to that, obviously, and I have. But it really allows us to really see clearly everything that's going on, because we're not just relying on how we feel about capitalism or how I feel about socialism and things like this. So these are some examples of what no historical materialism does to an MFer. So, yeah. Oh, wait, no. Where'd it go? Oh, here it is. Okay. So, yeah. Oh, our guy, Ben Shapiro. I forgot he was there. So, yes, it's so insane because I'm sure you guys have all seen, a lot of people have been radicalized over Palestine, and we're starting to see how the media doesn't match up with what we're seeing on the ground, right? We're seeing what history really is with, the Nakba in 1948 and the UK being able to just like give people Palestine. We're seeing that, but people don't want to admit that. They think that history started on October 7th. I saw a person with all full earnest and like just truly believed. He said, well, remember who struck who first. Basically being like, oh, this is Palestine's fault. That's why they're in this, because they had to strike the first blow. That's insane. That's just like nothing exists. But that's the world we live in. We live in an idealist world that is stripped from its context. We're stripped from its historical materialism. So I wanted to ask, I know we've got some people who are like, probably know a lot more than I do in the room. Does anyone have another example of history that we can apply a materialist lens to? Does anyone want to try giving it a shot? Now's your chance.
Like during the Iraq War, people were saying like the reason why we went to war with Iraq is they hate freedom, we love freedom. But if you look at where the money was going, it's like a lot of economic interests were the reason why. It's not because of freedom.
Absolutely, great point. I want to ask the crowd too, how many people, because this happened to me, how many people were taught that 9/11 happened because they were jealous of our freedom? My teacher literally looked me in the eye and said that. That's insane. Luckily I went home, my mom was pissed. But it's just something that they tell us, that freedom, what does freedom mean? They're jealous of us? No, it's like, what about the Gulf War? What about like it's just insane. So yeah, there's a ton of these things that we can apply a lens to. I'm thinking another one is like, you hear things, a lot of people come in here and they're like, oh, so you guys are socialists, like what's up with like North Korea? And I usually just give them the history of Korea. Like, do you know why there's a North and a South? Do people not know? Does anyone not know why there's a North and a South Korea? Okay, excellent. It's crazy. Two U.S. generals were drunk and smoking in a room in Washington, D.C., and they had a National Geographic map, and they were like, I think we should have the border here. And they drew a line on a map, and Koreans had to split on either side, and they could not go back or forth. And the whole thing started because the Korean War was against socialism and communism. They wanted to install a U.S. dictator or somebody that was absolutely had Koreans under their foot. The people fought back and they split it up. The same exact thing happened to Vietnam. There was a North and a South Vietnam, but they won, so they got to unify their country. But all these things aren't really taught to us. We're like, you know, the Vietnam War is this thing in the United States because we lost, and they don't really want to tell you that part. But there's like, I had a couple other examples. Does anyone have an example too of like a material? Yes.
I feel like a really prominent one right now is a lot of the discourse around political violence in particular, and just the blatant hypocrisy in statements like political violence is never okay, but then they'll support our actions during World War II, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's still pro-police, absurd instances, et cetera, which to me is very much an example of this, just ignoring context.
Exactly, ignoring context, that whole thing, the political violence, political violence. What about Patrice Lumumba? What about Fred Hampton? You know, what about all of these people? Oh, Salvador Allende in Chile. Like all these different people who have been murdered, assassinated, or couped all over the world. Is that not political violence? It's just, that's a great point because that's complete idealism. It's like stripped of its context. Yeah, Cuba was a good example. I'm trying to think. Anyone other? Do you guys get what we're saying? It's like this the context. You hear these things like with Venezuela. It's crazy that we drone striked innocent people on ships and everyone just kind of goes, oh, I mean, I've heard that Venezuela has a bunch of drug cartels, so there's probably a drug cartel. They're innocent people, but the United States of America creates citizens that are so just like zombified with this idealist version of the world. It's just wild, and real lives are on the line. It's really crazy. Does anyone have any questions about dialectical or historical materialism? We'll get into a little bit more too at the end, some more applications of it, just so you can kind of feel it out a little bit more. Cool, going once, going twice. Excellent, excellent. So now we're gonna move in. Those were the two most important ones. So when you're going and interacting in the world, when stuff happens, when we're starting to hear talks, this was like, you know, the Russia and Ukraine, is Russia gonna invade Ukraine, et cetera, what's going on with Iran, what's going on, all these things that are happening in the world around us. It's so important that we start studying history from a materialist and a working class perspective. Because when you study history, you understand that Iran was couped in 1953. It was one of the first ones that the United States got to. And it was because they tried to nationalize their oil. And by that, if you're unfamiliar with like nationalization of the resource, that just means the profits go back into the nation that it comes from. And so they can distribute that amongst themselves to build roads, to build schools, etc. But back in the day, the UK or the British Empire owned the oil. So all of that finance, all of that wealth was getting transferred out. I think in France, it was like 1 in 4 light bulbs were being lit from Africa. Like all of these colonial entities are existing off of the backs of the third world, or the global majority, actually. So we'll learn how to apply that in the future. But right now, we're going to get into private property. Say it with me now, private property. These ones are all going to go a little bit shorter and kind of build off of each other. So we know when society started privatizing things through like wars and enclosure and laws, since the advent of that private property, your social and economic class has always been based on your relation to private property. And they really confuse us about private property because they don't tell us the difference between personal property. And there is a difference. So there are two different types of property. There's personal property, which are items that are intended for personal use. So it's possessions, consumer goods, furniture, clothing, trinkets, even your personal transportation, like your bike or your personal car, or even your own house. These are items that are created by labor for use. Private property is different, and they really want to confuse you on that. These are items that are intended for social use. They're like factories or farms, mines, prisons, industry, enterprise. It's what's like called the means of production. It's these things that are multiple people can use. It would be honestly like evil to have just one person own them, but they do. So personal property are items that are created by labor for use, like a cell phone. And private property are things that require labor to generate profit. So like I said, it's like mines, and unfortunately under capitalism, prisons, industry, all of these things. So we have to know the difference. Personal property are things that you personally use. And private property are things that are used to extract profit. And often, under a capitalist system, and not even often, this is what capitalism is. Capitalism is a minority of people who own private property. So they own the factories, the schools. That's why Amazon is owned and not nationalized. Amazon itself isn't inherently a bad thing. If you nationalized Amazon and all the profits weren't going to one guy or a board, if they were redistributed back to help pay workers more, if they were to help build infrastructure and housing, etc., it wouldn't necessarily be a terrible thing. And yeah, they want to freak you out because in the Communist Manifesto, actually, it does specifically say that communists are asking for the abolition of private property. And they use, I saw a video on Facebook the other day, it's like, the communists are coming for your house, they're coming for your toothbrush, they're coming for your private property. No, 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 no. We don't want your specific house. You can have your house. I want the apartment complex that you own that you don't even live in, your secondary house, your third house. That should belong to the people. Everyone should, everyone should get a plate before you're getting seconds. And even that, the communists don't want that. They want that for the people. That should be something that is collectively owned and collectively decided on. You had a question? Yeah, so we would want public property. Public property is great, but that would still differentiate from your personal property. My phone would not become your guys's. This would still be, your phone wouldn't become mine. You would still have access to the things that you need. Your house, your car, your bicycle or your car. I already said car. These are things that you need for personal, like to get to work, to get to see your family, et cetera, et cetera. But to make it public would be like a library. A library is public. Everyone can use that. We all pitch in, and we pay the workers, and we pay to keep the books and the lights on. That's public. We want to make what was once private, which are these corporations, owned by the public so that the profits get distributed to the people who are doing the work. That's, in essence, what communism is. So I'm going to test you guys. We're going to go through, I'm going to show you some slides, and you're going to yell out if it's personal or private. Can you guys do that? Okay, so with this one, is it personal or is it private? Personal. Private. Yes, that one gets you because there's two different types, right? There's the one that's owned by the corporation. The worker has to use that in order to do its job, but the worker doesn't own that. That would be, the private property, the means of production. What is this? That's your personal property. Personal property. A factory is a private. Private. Trains, transportation, this public. Transportation that should be for the public, privatized. Perfect. Excellent. Yup. So that's the difference between personal and private property. They try to scare you because I heard it more times than I can count. You guys just want to take my toothbrush. I don't know where that one came from. We don't want people's toothbrush. We want everyone to have access to what they need. Shelter, water, food, clothing, etc. And then after that, we have more than enough to go to everyone. It's not like we're going to have to go it won't be a standard of poor. It'll be a once the billionaires redistribute their wealth, we'll have a higher living standard than we can even imagine. So that takes us to the means of production, which is slightly different than private property. They're kind of one and the same, but it's more specific to production. So it's the means of production. Excellent. So these are, it's like the private stuff. It's the property, infrastructure, tech and software, facilities, machines, but it's everything that is necessary for the production of goods and services within a society. So communists, socialists, anarchists, we all call for the abolition of private property and for the seizure of the means of production. This sounds scary, right? It sounds like, ooh, oh no, because we live under capitalism and we don't know what anything means. The means of production, we're gonna get into that. So, just like the Amazon factory, or like what we showed, the trucks and everything, that is all the means of production. These are the way production happens. And so if the workers had control over this, in the sense that they, if the workers wanted to start a business, they could develop all of this, and then they could vote on their wages. They could vote what to do with the profits that they make, whether or not they want to increase their own wages or distribute their wages and donate to charities or donate to taxes, etc. They have control over all of that. So if you're working in an Amazon warehouse, if you're working at Starbucks, the property you live on, the machines, all of these things that you don't own are the means towards production. So if you're working in, let's say, like a tech job, the software and things like that. It's interesting because Karl Marx wrote the Communist Manifesto like 200 years ago, so I was trying to come up with stuff that what would Marx say about Uber? So yeah, that's actually an interesting point. And I'll say this right now, I drive a lot for Uber Eats. That's an interesting one. They try to shift it, smoke and mirrors with personal and private property, right? I technically own my car, so I own my means of production, but I wouldn't be able to do any of the work without the proprietary technology that is the app. And so if workers owned that app, we could say how much we want to charge people, how much we get paid, et cetera, et cetera. Since we live in Hollywood, the epicenter of culture, if you're working, I don't know if anyone in here works in on sound stages, et cetera. All of the lights, the cameras, the stages, all that stuff are the means of production. If you're a farmer, it's the tractor, the tractors, the machinery, the fields itself. Can you imagine if farm workers were able to have a say in how all of that works and put together? And again, I added this one in too because tech, there's a lot of proprietary tech. We had a class once where people were like, I do social media and stuff like that, but it's you still need Instagram, you still need all these social media things to be able to have your work done. And then I want to pose the question to y'all, what are the means of production in your workplace? Oops, I did not pose the question. Oh, sorry, who owns private property? Capitalists, the bourgeoisie, exactly. Oh my God. Sorry, my version is different. How embarrassing. Okay, yeah, so you guys are doing great. I know this is a ton of information to go over. And so I wanted to say being bad at it is the first step to being good at it. So we're going over a lot. It is complicated. And just be lucky that some Uber driver is teaching you and not a German philosopher in 1848 is all I can say. So now we're going to get into a breakdown of economic systems. Because what is the difference between Marxism and socialism and communism? And I'm going to first play a TikToker. He's going to explain it, and then we'll break it down even further. The volume might be so bad. I'm not sure. We'll try this. Oh my gosh.
What's the difference between Marxism, communism, and socialism? Marxism is a way of studying society, a worldview. It says that societies change and move based on struggles between conflicting economic classes. Capitalism, struggle happens between the wage laborers and the capitalists. And once the workers seize political power from the capitalists and begin to transfer economic power to themselves, we have socialism, an economic system where the state and the surplus of society are controlled by the workers. As workers continue to construct their new society, they eventually get to a point where economic classes don't even exist. The only class is the working class, who produces for themselves and for the benefit of society, and at that point, you have communism. So socialism sort of like a transitory stage where you have a dictatorship of the proletariat, control of the government by the workers. And Marxism is just the study of how these class struggles happen. Communism is the classless society that we can eventually reach. And there's your lesson for today. I hope you learned something.
So, like we learned, Marxism is the science that overall kind of like analyzes and critiques these systems, and there are three differing systems. The one we all know and love, capitalism, is like this economic and socio-political system, and it's actually like, it's like a global order, right? Where businesses and property are privately owned by a minority of people, and prices as well as wages are determined by competition in markets. Its goal is to make profit and for infinite economic growth. So if we were to transfer out of that, like he said, I think he used the term dictatorship of the proletariat, which sounds really scary, but remember, we're the proletariat, and we're sort of living in this triangle, right? There's like so many of the masses of people, and we're ran and controlled by a minority of people that are on the top. The dictatorship of the proletariat would be us enforcing our rules, essentially, and inverting that triangle so that the majority of people kind of organize the world, and then eventually that minority people sort of assimilate into one of us, right? So socialism would be that transition. And these are all theorized. So Karl Marx is interesting. He did a lot of critique of capitalism, and he was a socialist, but he never actually, and contrary to popular belief, he never actually envisioned what communism would look like. This has been given to us from other examples and other theorists and revolutionaries. So socialism is pretty much as far as he went with that. Not really, but I don't want to get into it. The economic system that transitions out of capitalism and would be going, it's like the bridge towards communism. It is when the means of production cease to be private property of just like a tiny, minuscule group of people and become the common property of all of society. It's a system where a governing body is made up of workers from all industries, so like teachers, doctors, barbers, actors, artists, all these different types of people. Because we've seen how it's done. There have been examples in history of how people have organized society. It's not a copy and paste thing, though. We're not going to be able to do what Cuba does. I love Cuba. I love the Soviet Union. I love all these examples of socialism being tried in history. But that won't work for 2025, the United States. So it's up to us to envision like this new world that we want to build. But we need the theory and the politics to be defined to be able to build that. So yeah, we would decide how resources and profits are used. And this would be called the dictatorship of proletariat, because we'd be like, hey, Elon, give us your money so we can build a school or we can have free healthcare, et cetera. Stop giving money to Israel. Like, these are things that we could, as a population, ask for and do. So that would lead us into communism, which Karl Marx never defined, but it has been envisioned. It's an economic system where all private property, not personal property, you still have that, like land, resources, social services, and industries are owned collectively. And this, in theory, would dissolve social classes. Profits would be redistributed back into communities by each according to their ability, to each according to their need. And so this isn't a class about Communism 101, this is just Marxism 101. So we are planning on having a couple different other 101 type classes. We had an Imperialism 101, we're gonna do an Organizing 101, and then I think for this topic, we're going to have a Socialism in Action 101, where we get way more into the Cuban Revolution, the Korean War, the Chinese Revolution, all these different places that had successful or non-successful revolutions. So it's our comrade again from earlier. He's going to explain a little bit about communism, I think. I can't remember what this video is about.
Capitalism would rather throw food away, keep houses empty, and let people die than guarantee food, housing, and healthcare for all. Because if everyone's needs are met, The tiny group of people who own those things stop profiting. Communism flips this completely. Production is organized for need, not for profit. Housing, healthcare, food, education, energy stop being commodities to sell and become rights guaranteed to everyone, not only those who can afford these things. Second, under capitalism, workers create all the wealth but only get a fraction back as wages, while billionaires hoard the rest. If you are paid X amount per month, that's not everything you produced. The surplus, the value you created beyond your wage, is pocketed by someone as profit. Under communism, that surplus doesn't vanish into yachts and stock markets. It's reinvested into society, public services, infrastructure, science, culture, to be enjoyed by everyone. The wealth doesn't get trapped in the hands of a few shareholders. It circulates back to the people. And here's the key. Communism works because we, the working class, already run production every single day. We build, we farm, we transport, we heal, we code, we teach. The world is already in our hands. The only difference is that under capitalism, all this wealth passes first through a boss or owner who tell us how to do what we already know how to do. And the wealth we produce goes to them first, so they decide what to do with it based on their interests, not on society's needs. So what does communism do? It removes that parasite from the equation. It makes sure the wealth created by billions of workers serves billions of workers, not a handful of parasites at the top. And that's not utopia. That's just common sense.
So excellent. Does anyone have any questions on the different? I don't want to get too much into it because, like I said, we're going to have a class that focuses on these economic systems. But does anyone? Do you guys know the difference? Can you tell the difference between the 3 or 4? Okay. Just for the sake of time, I'm sorry. This is so much information. We're going to move on. So when we look at everything through this materialist lens that we've learned to look at, we begin to see the cracks and faults of capitalism. You guys already saw them even before you took this class, right? Like, everyone can see it. It's not that hard to see. We see history for what it is and not what we wish it would be. We see our relationship with capitalism clearly, and through these revolutionary theories, we can accurately name, target, and then intervene into the root causes of exploitation. So why can't we afford rent? Even when we're at our, like, the economy's so good right now, et cetera, et cetera. Why, no matter how hard we work, we can't stay afloat even with record corporate profits? And Marx has answers in some of his theories. And we are going to fly through these, so I apologize. This is just kind of the boring stuff, and since I made the class, I'm just gonna go through. Labor theory of value. Excellent, everyone. So like I said, Marx probably wrote like so many pages about this theory. But basically the value of something like a chair or like a pair of shoes comes from the amount of labor that was put into it. So if a chair takes you 30 hours, it's going to be worth more than something that takes you 15 minutes, right? That's so obvious. But he goes more into like socially necessary labor time. These are like terms you don't really need to know about, but basically the gist is our labor is what makes things the way that they are. When human beings use their skills to create raw materials into something useful, like turning a piece of wood into a chair, they create something valuable. When this table is sold as a product, it takes on like a new identity. It's not just a table anymore. It becomes a commodity, which is traded and valued in a market. So the key to understanding capitalist economy lies in understanding what a commodity is and how we ourselves as workers, we become one. So kind of like how the personal versus private property argument was, there's a similar kind of thing with commodities. So if you're baking bread to feed your family, you're just baking bread. You're not creating a commodity. It doesn't change the nature of the item. But if you're producing bread to sell on a market, if you're going somewhere and you're making multiple of them that your family can't eat and you're selling your excess, that changes its nature. It becomes a commodity. So through the capitalist system, we're selling our bodies and our time to capitalists every day for wages. They're paying us for what we can give to them. So essentially, we're being traded on a market, right? That's why our wages have always stayed low and the profits keep going up. We ourselves become that commodity. And if you aren't born into wealth, your only capital, the only thing that you have that's worth something that can make you profit is your labor or your body. So automatically your human body, your mind, if you're like a writer, a coder, an artist, is a commodity that you must sell. And if you can't sell it for enough, you won't be able to care for it and you will lose that capital, if that makes sense. So corporations, they're constantly lobbying and just fighting in every way. They're doing coups, assassinations, genocides to keep wages down and to keep rents high. It's kind of crazy how this is just the nature of capitalism, and that's how it works for them. So in California, this is from 2023, and I know that it's gone way up, but to be able to like live comfortably, you would have to be making $42, oh my gosh, sorry, per hour just to be able to survive. And what's our minimum wage, like 15, 16, something? It's just crazy because we're not getting paid anywhere near what we need to actually survive. I don't know how any of us are doing it. If you guys know how you're doing it, please tell me. Because everyone's struggling and it's just crazy. So that's sort of the essence of how we become a commodity, and it's going to get broken down a little bit further in our next topic, but just about like the labor theory of value and how our labor is enacted onto things like books or products like the iPhone, like all the mining in the Congo. That's why things are worth what they're worth. There is further learning on it. I just kind of didn't want to get into it because for our purpose in fighting fascism, we already know we're being exploited. So yeah, there's further learning. Any questions? Oh, yes. Yeah, absolutely. The question was posed about AI and capitalism. AI is such a funny thing because under capitalism, it's not making us have any extra free time. They're still they're going to take all of our jobs and then just create an underbelly, or as Marx calls it, like a, oh, I forgot the term, never mind. But there's just like, do you know it? Sorry? Yeah, like not necessarily lumpen proletariat, but like this pool of workers that are out of work. And it's crazy because under socialism, AI wouldn't be bad. If we had AI, but all of the profits were divvied up between us, having machines or something take on the labor that was once really difficult for people to do, we would just take the time off. We would sit back and go, oh, we'll let them take care of it, right? But under capitalism, there's no protections like that. It's all about making profit. So they're using AI to enforce this, like this underbelly of people. The lumpen proletariat would end up being like people who use illegal means of working economy, like drug dealers, prostitution, et cetera, this sort of like underlayer. But yeah, so it's interesting with AI. AI isn't, kind of like how I mentioned earlier, Amazon in itself necessarily wouldn't be a terrible thing if it was under a different economic system. But it's how we organize ourselves that makes it so unsafe and so unhealthy for people. The world that we live in. AI right now is terrifying because it's taking our jobs and we have no protections. But under socialism, AI doing all the jobs for us would literally just create more free time. People wouldn't have to work. And we'd get, oh yeah, Joe, do you want to compound on that?
Yeah, I was going to say, so like one of the interesting things about like these contradictions that we've been talking about is that AI is a technology that capitalists are going to use to replace humans and put us out of a job, but they also need people to like buy all the stuff that they're making. And so there's these contradictions that can't be resolved with capitalism because the more technology we use, the less people that are going to have jobs, the less people are going to have money to buy all the stuff they're producing. So these are the kind of things that are like inherent in the system that are eventually going to destroy it, and that's kind of all these things are connected or like disconnected.
Absolutely. Did you want to ask something?
Oh yeah, I found the word reserve army of labor.
Reserve Army of Labor. That was it. Perfect. Thank you so much. And then you in the back?
I was going to add to that point,
Yeah, absolutely. It's crazy because they're giving ICE agents college education and healthcare and all these things that we've been begging for. Yeah, great points, everyone. I meant to earlier when I said you guys were doing great and sucking at something is the first step. That was supposed to be a break time. So I'm so sorry. It's so hot in here. I'm going to give you guys like a 5-minute break to grab some water, to stretch, just because this is so much information and I'm talking a lot tonight. So yeah, give yourself a little stretch, get some water, go stand outside. It's actually cold outside and it's hot in here. So take a break.
One thing I very much wanted to talk to you about, we can, if you want, talk more in depth later, but one of the main reasons I came here was trying to get connections as my partner and I, we've had folks in the area, teens on our block, try to stone us. And today, my partner was getting hurt verbally harassed, and they were mentally preparing for a possible attack tonight. And so, just kind of trying to go around and see who, like, could help out with, like, getting connects out from where we are, or anybody who might know people who are willing to go that distance, because it's something I get being difficult. We can talk further at the end, but just kind of trying to let you know that I would very much like to talk about that, see what you can offer, see what can be done.
Yeah, I know that I can definitely message some networks that I have. Where would you say you guys are staying?
Barstow specifically.
Barstow? Okay. Let me see if I have, I'll think about it. I'll think if I have, like, I know that some people live out there.
Even like folks that are like more like San Bernardino residents that are willing to make that drive. Because I know not everyone is, but some folks are that I've seen in the past. And like the big thing being is physical people there. Even if they can't throw down, and I understand, just recording emotional support, aftercare, like that kind of stuff.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, let's talk after.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. What's your name again?
Malo.
Malo? Okay, excellent. Savannah.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. I didn't know it was you until your mask came off.
Yeah, how you doing?
What the hell? Hi, Savannah. Good to see you. Nice to see you guys.
This is great.
It's so hot.
You know, we are unintentionally sitting right in front of the fan, so we feel great, right? Like, I feel pretty good.
Gosh, I was so bummed because we're live streaming this, so like, Gabe was like, you can't have any fans on here.
Because of the sound.
This was on and it was perfect, and now like it's turning off. But yeah, so we're gonna get AC someday.
Yeah, it'll happen.
It's not bad. I think the fans are perfectly placed.
You could get one of those in the menu. Yeah.
Yeah, we're working on it. We gotta like, we have so much fundraising. We're gonna have Halloween coming up for like rent and stuff. But yeah, how's everything?
Good.
I feel like Nelly Boys is just like popping off.
Yeah.
They just got renewed for season 2. Yeah?
My fiance is obsessed.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I love it.
Good
I just,
show.
he was home and I was like traveling a lot, so he got to binge the whole thing. And I'm like, I keep moving.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a quick watch.
That's all right. It's okay.
This is also amazing.
This
so
is great.
fun.
This is important work.
It's so much information and it's so hard to get out. And I feel like
You're making it very digestible. And I think, you know, for a lot of people, I think some of this information, some of these words we've heard of, and it's nice to get either a refresher or like a deeper dive into like, what does it really mean? So it's
also
not
like
too much.
a clarification.
Yeah.
Right? Because like propaganda has changed the definition of certain words to make people afraid of a good thing.
it's wild. Right? The fact is like, this is a public event, so like, sometimes we get people who are just walking by, so like, you know, and so like, I don't know how to balance it, but also it is like, you have to have a sort of like
of like grant funding, or do they have a lot of donors? And is that what you try to do here? Is that how like some of this is done? Okay.
We're not. It's so interesting, and I go over it in our like actually
I forgot to. Wait, was that whole conversation live streamed? I didn't think about it till this.
All right, all right, all right. Thank you guys so much. I hope that break refueled you. I'm sorry again for the heat. It's crazy in here. Yeah, and everyone got water. We're gonna move right ahead because we are actually towards the end of it, and I know this is a lot of information, and I want you guys give yourself a round of applause for sitting through this. Because usually I mention too, we live in the entertainment capital of the world. You guys could be anywhere right now. You could be seeing a movie, you could be smoking weed, watching Netflix, you could be at the club, you could be anywhere, but you're in a hot room learning about Marxism. Like, that's crazy. So good on you, good on you. This is just showing, if you look around, how many people are interested in changing the world, and that should give you hope. So now we're going to get into surplus value. Excellent. So Marx was the first to discover and explain the specific source of inequality under capitalism. We are going to do some math, unfortunately, but I made it pretty easy for you, and let's just imagine that there's like no taxes and stuff like that. So let's say a worker labors 8 hours a day, and we're paid $10 an hour, or like $80 cash a day. But what your work consists of making products, right? And you can make one product each hour. That product then gets sold for, like, let's say $160. So every hour after your employer pays you your whatever, your rent, your wage, they're making $150 an hour, and you're only making 10, even though you made that product that was sold for $160. All they had to do was go, thank you, here's your money, and then they made the money off of that. So this means that part of your working day is paid, because once you end up working for the amount that you've made for them, you should be done with your job, but you continue to work for 8 hours longer, right? Sometimes. So yeah, part is paid and part is unpaid. Profit for capitalists has always just been unpaid labor of workers. It's what they're paying you the lowest wage for what they're making off of you. No democracy exists in your workplace. You don't get to decide where that surplus value goes that you make them. And the capitalist just takes it, and we have no say in how it's spent. This girl is going to explain it much better than I just did.
So again, let's use the Starbucks thing as an example and break it down. Let's say a barista can make 20 drinks in an hour, which are then sold for $5 each. Through their labor, using the machines and combining the coffees and creams and syrups, they're able to generate $100 worth of profits for Starbucks in just an hour.
but they're only paid minimum wage, which is what, $11? Where does that remaining $89 go? It goes to Starbucks. It goes into the pockets of the people who own the company, despite them not being involved in the labor needed to make those frappuccinos at all. They did buy the materials, sure, but the barista generated the value of the commodity made from the materials. But they don't actually get to benefit from that labor. They're only paid a fraction of the value of their work. This is what Marx termed as surplus value, the difference between the total worth of the worker's labor and the actual amount of compensation they were paid. That difference, that surplus value, is kept as profit by the capitalist. And that right there is exploitation. The profit-driven capitalist economy relies on the undercompensated labor of the workers.
So it's kind of interesting because when this class was 2 different classes, I actually had like group projects we would work on. It just ended up being so long and lengthy, but we would do a pyramid where we would get a bunch of different job titles and we'd put them on whether we thought they were like bourgeoisie or proletariat. But it's interesting, a lot of people when you're first getting into socialism, and I'm using, by all people I mean me, I was very classist when I started this. Classes against rich people. Like, I hated them. I hated them no matter what. I was like, oh, you're rich? Boo. You know what I mean? But when you're understanding how capitalism works and you're realizing that even people, like one of the jobs that we had on there was like basketball players. That was an interesting for people because people are like, oh, basketball players have so much money. They're so rich. They're the bourgeoisie. But it's not, they're not. They don't own their likeness. They don't, they're offering their bodies to their capitalist owners, and they're getting paid, they're compensated very, well, way better than us, but they're still technically part of the working class. And why we do this exercise is so that we can see that there are so many more of them. Like, this group expands so much bigger, right? And so that just, hopefully, it gives me hope knowing that there are people who can be our allies. Like, we have people historically who have been on the wealthier side that have foregone that to be able to help. Fidel Castro, for instance, when they appropriated land to the workers, the first land to go was his family's land. He distributed that to the public. So there's a lot of these intricacies when it comes to capitalism, but so many people and so many different types of work aren't being compensated fairly for that. And it's just an interesting thing to think about. Did you have a comment or question? Exactly. So we call these people who are like from this like really high-end bourgeoisie, we call them class traders. If they come down and they work with us to help, help us gain our interests. Also, that goes the other way too, though. There are class traders in our own class. These are people who are born into the working class and they sign up to help defend the bourgeoisie. So, like, think police, think military, think private security. All these people who are like one of us that decide, you know what, I'm gonna go and I'm gonna be a part on their team. And we see them everywhere. Charlie Kirk was one of them. But yeah, so there's class traders that go both ways. All is that to say is that there are just so many workers in the United States. The majority of people are workers. There's a tiny minority sitting on the top. And then what's insane, when we're talking about surplus value being stolen, it's being taken from us, that's not even the biggest way that we're robbed. This is a graph that I think came out in 2022. This is talking about all the different kinds of ways people are, like their property or money is taken from them. So down here we have robbery and like burglary and larceny, auto theft. So this is like, bless you, it's like working class on working class crime, right? It's like, oh, you're so afraid, you need police because the robbers are gonna get you. It actually counts for like a very, comparatively, a very small amount of money being taken. What's crazy is all the way over here are all of the ways in which your employer is stealing from you every day. I literally just worked a job where I wasn't able to take breaks, and I know that's illegal, but I turn into some sort of like, yes, sir, whenever I get any sort of job, and it's so embarrassing as a communist. But I didn't take any breaks because I'm like, I worked so hard. But these are minimum wage these are overtime violations and rest break violations, off the clock violations. I gave that company, it was 15 minutes, but I still gave them that from me, and I worked through it, sweating my ass off. It's crazy. But that's how much they're stealing from us, and that's on top of the surplus value that they're taking just from existing as the person that is paying you out. Any questions on surplus value? Excellent. Okay. So, through all of this exploitation of the, everything that we go through, all of the harshness of our material reality as the working class, it does take a toll on the psyche. We can experience immense dread, dissatisfaction, and loneliness. Marx calls this alienation. So Marx had this thing called the theory of alienation, and I'm going to have a person explain it a little bit.
Cool Ideas by famous philosophers, Karl Marx, alienation. Alienation is the divorce between your essence and existence, the inescapable disillusionment of spending your days building things that are never yours. It is in this process you lose what is human about you, the yearn to create, and all that's left is the animal within you, the desire to consume.
So Marx's theory of alienation describes the experience of human life as meaningless or the human self as worthless in modern capitalist society. Who here feels like that sometimes? It doesn't matter, right? We all die. It's like it's almost like creates this nihilism. It creates this ability to just like not want to fight back, and that's on purpose. I'm gonna play a little bit of a video because there is more of a science. This isn't about like how we feel. Again, we're materialists, so it's not so much about like feeling alienated or isolated. There is like a scientific reason. I'm gonna play a little video. Oh, never mind, I cut the video. It's actually quite long anyways. But basically, we're alienated in 4 different types of ways. We're alienated from the product because the product isn't ours. We didn't create it. We're told to create something. We're alienated from production. We are literally just part of the process. If they could replace us with AI, they would and they will. We're alienated from other workers and the fact that we have to compete with them. Back in like 2019, I tried to unionize my workplace, and I told a lot of the girls, I was like, you guys, we can't stand for this. Like, we have to fight. And they were just like, oh, if you don't want this job, somebody else is going to take it. Like, that was the overall idea, like how everyone felt about it. And that's happened in so many ways, and that's how employers feel. If you're going to complain, I'll just fire you and get somebody else that won't. And so you're in competition with your workers. You're not working in collaboration. And you're alienated from your own soul because we have this desire to create. We have a desire to be a part of something, right? So here's just some more videos about it.
I swear therapy only works until you bring up capitalism. Like I told my therapist that I feel alienated and dehumanized at work. I feel like they just say jump and I have to say how high. And she's like, but have you tried buying a planner?
Sorry, that was so loud. Oh my gosh, here's another one.
I don't want to work anymore. Because I'm working every day very hard and I never had money. Fucking shit. So, everything is expensive, motherfucker.
Excellent. So can I get a volunteer to read a quote for me? Someone who hasn't? Perfect. Excellent. So read this quote, please. There's that Marx as a poet. Thank you so much. Round of applause. Yay. Okay. I love when I don't talk. I talk so much in this. So now, any questions on that? On alienation, I think it's pretty self-explanatory. I think capitalism sucks. Okay. Now we're getting into the positive side. We're gonna go into how we can, handle all this. So this is the last this is the last portion of the class. We're gonna go into conflict theory. Excellent, guys. So as a reminder, capitalist society is divided into 2 opposing groups in constant conflict. There's the proletariat, again, workers who sell their labor in exchange for wages. And there's the bourgeoisie, who are the private owners of these corporations and the means of production. But remember that the proletariat is the larger group. The bourgeoisie is a minority. It's a triangle, right? And they're sitting tiny but comfortable on the top right now. There was something else I was going to say about this. Oh, yeah. Obviously, for the purposes of this class, we just went into the 2 opposing groups, proletariat and the bourgeoisie. As you mentioned earlier, there are like subsects of each part. So that's more of a 102 class. But for the purposes of this class, we're just proletariat and the bourgeoisie. So I'm going to have this comrade explains conflict theory so good. So I'm just going to play this video.
I want to start a series where I talk about Marxism, so here we go. On today's episode, we're going to cover conflict theory. Conflict theory, first developed by Karl Marx, is a theory that society is in a state of perpetual conflict because of competition for limited resources. It basically states that tensions and conflicts arise when resources, status, and power are unevenly distributed between groups in society, and that these conflicts become the engine for social change. In a capitalist society, there are two classes. One is the bourgeoisie, or the owners of the means of production. These are the people that own the means of which society produces its wealth. So they own the corporations, they own the stores, they own the factories, the stuff that produces value. The other class is the proletariat, or working class. Now this class doesn't own any means of production, right? The working class doesn't own factories, they don't own stores, they don't own businesses or corporations. Therefore, the only way we can make a living is by selling ourselves or our labor power to our employers or to the bourgeoisie in order to make a living. Now, the working class is the class that produces the value of society by doing the actual labor necessary to produce the value. Marx theorized that the bourgeoisie, being the powerful minority class, and the proletariat, being an oppressed majority class, will always inevitably be at conflict because of the interests of the two being at odds, and the resources being unjustly distributed among them. For example, 1% of the wealthiest Americans own 16 times more wealth than the bottom 50% of Americans. And it is these conditions that lead to inevitable class conflicts between the two classes. And this idea that the two classes have conflicting interests shows itself with the fact that your employer is always trying to pay you as little as possible to do as much work as possible, while you, as a proletariat or working class member, are trying to do as little work as possible and get paid as much as possible. Marx theorizes that out of these conflicts, the working class will gain a better quality of life. A conflict between the two classes is the reason we have an 8-hour workday, the reason we have a minimum wage and can't be exploited like they were in the early Industrial Revolution. However, Marx also theorized that if we concede and accept these concessions, and the conflict gets appeased to maintain a capitalist system, then the cycle of conflict will just keep repeating. However, if the changes made created a new system like socialism, then peace and stability could be achieved. Basically, so long as a minority ruling class oppresses a majority working class, conflict is inevitable. And this is why we need to take economic and political power away from a small group of elite people and into the hands of the majority working class. Because that is the only way we can actually establish a truly democratic society.
Comrade does a really great job of explaining and tying it all up with a bow. It's really interesting because he mentioned how Marx had theorized that as long as we're getting concessions, it'll postpone this inevitability and just create more struggle in the long run. We're seeing that all the time, right? Where we make gains as a society. We're like, oh, women, we got women to vote. At any time, they can take that away from us. Roe v. Wade is getting pulled back. All these rights that we had can constantly get pulled back. It's the system that requires profit and requires labor constantly to keep it going. It's just not right? And it's unfortunate because you want to be able to do like little nice things every once in a while. Like maybe if we get some reforms, maybe if we, for example, there was that Fight for 15. I don't know if you guys remember that campaign. There are people who are fighting for a $15 minimum wage. By the time they won it, $15 was nowhere near being enough. So we're like asking for all these crumbs, and it just keeps getting pushed down the line. It's insane to think that all the capitalists would have to do is give us healthcare, and there'd probably be like 3 of you in here. If we had some of our needs met, I don't think people would be as angry as they are now. But they won't even do that. That's how violent they are. That's how class interested they are. It's really crazy because all they'd have to do is just give us one little concession, but they won't even do that. We have to fight and claw and scream to just get something. We were all out in Hollywood. There's 100,000 people in 2020 to defund or abolish the police. It was a little bit of an inconsistent message. If we were unified in that ask, maybe that could have happened. We weren't unified. And also, they just funded the police more because they don't care. They're just like, we need the police because who's going to protect us for when all these people are angry and hungry and they're knocking on our door? So we have to remember that we're living in a really tiny window of history. Remember all of humanity where we engage with each other cooperatively, where we work together, where we farm together. Used to be able to go down to the river and just drink the water, right? It is detrimental to our movement that we know that this isn't forever. Capitalism is bound to lose. It is unsustainable. Systems change, empires fall, and history will always march on. It's not going to just stop moving. But how does society change, and how do we make it last, and how do we actually uplift and absolutely turn society on its head right now? Because we're going to need something more than a couple extra rights here and there, some representation sprinkled into our media, right? We're going to need a systems change. And this is the conflict theory of like, how does this happen? How do we make this? And I hate to be the bearer of bad news. Oh, thank you. But it's gonna be revolution, right? That has to happen. And I'm not here, this isn't a revolutions class, this is Marxism 101. So I'm not here to tell you how that's gonna be come about or why. There are people who have done it all around us. It's beautiful how society can change and how they've been able to try to make the world a better place. So there is a scientific process to this as well. So there is this sort of revolutionary sequence. First, you'll have like a bunch of economic crises. That will lead to the suffering of the proletariat, right? And then with that suffering, people start to go, why is it like this? And because of capitalism, they're going like, it's the immigrants, it's the trans people, that's why. But we know, being materialists and looking around, that it's absolutely because billionaires exist. It's because they're not paying taxes. It's because of the way the system works that is driving all of the money towards the top. So with all of our suffering and wondering why, and then looking at the actual reasons, we start to gain revolutionary class consciousness. We're recognizing that we're closer to a homeless person or a child in Palestine. We're way closer to them than we would ever be to a billionaire. So after that, which is where I think we kind of are, we're in this like suffering revolutionary class consciousness stage. Socialism has like a higher positivity. People really are getting into this idea again. It's coming back after like a counter revolution of 3 decades of, probably even longer than that, of Red Scare propaganda, just absolute propaganda and all these things to scare us off this. So once something happens, there's been people who have theorized how revolution can work out. If you are interested in taking this further, there's Marxism, Leninism. Lenin was the person that led, or part of the group that led the very first revolution of working class people in the history. And they gained state power that way. But Marxism, Leninism is the application of Marxism to revolution. And so they theorize spontaneity, they theorize all these different types of ways in order to achieve revolution. And if we look around the room and we look at all of the people who have inspired us before, from Ho Chi Minh, Fidel Castro, Thomas Sankara, all these people, we have to study what revolutions worked. What was the ideology behind it? What was the driving force? And we have this beautiful access to so many different texts and so many different stories. If you can claw your way through the fog and the mud to be able to see like that crystallized distillation of what freedom looks like, it looks like what happened in Haiti in 1805. It looks like what happened in Ireland and Cuba and everywhere, Venezuela, all these different places, in Chile, in Nicaragua, in China, in Korea, and Vietnam. We have people who have studied this and fought and died. It's very crazy. We're very lucky to be able to have all of that because then once we gain state power, we would be able to implement this dictatorship of the proletariat, right? That would be the dictatorship of us. We live under a dictatorship of capital. Elon Musk, Trump, the freaking Sacklers, the what are they called? Rothschilds. All those people. We're in a dictatorship of them. They're the new kings and queens. And then ultimately, once we become in power and everyone gets everything that they need, then hopefully there would be a withering away of a state and then leading to communism. So again, I have to tell you guys, like, we are facing class divisions. We're facing economic inequalities, exploitation, perpetual wars, a fucking genocide in 4K. I saw a man's beating heart on the ground, externalized from his body, still beating on the ground. We're living in a period of time that is, it's so important that we act. It is just beyond important that we act now. We have so many generations that are going to be looking back and wondering why we haven't done anything. But I will tell you, I know why you also like, what do I do? What do I do? We are so many decades behind where we need to be because they've killed all of our leaders. They've killed all of our thinkers, all of our young people. They've stamped the resistance out of us. But we need to be able to break out of that and be able to find that love in revolution, that community that has been taken away from us. We are the working class, and there are more of us than them. And what's crazy is revolutions have happened in conditions far worse than that. We can still meet in this room, and I can openly say I'm a communist. Why I love the history of the Soviet Union so much is these people were living in a feudal society while the rest of Europe had already moved on to capitalism. They were still stuck under feudalism. And what's crazy, they were poor, they couldn't read, and they had this propaganda that tied their monarchy, the czars, to God. So people in pre-revolutionary Russia, they thought that their kings were gods. So they were unable to meet. They had to do everything in secret. They had to teach people how to read. Their conditions were terrible. But they killed God to give themselves freedom. And they did that. And it's insane to think of how much their paradigm shift in order to give women rights, in order to get children out of like horrible working conditions, and to put a man on the moon, right? Like, or to put people in space, to beat us in the space race, besides putting a man on the moon. It's insane what socialism has been able to achieve for people. We're seeing it happen now all over the world. And we just have to try. And there are sparks of revolution everywhere you look. Remember when I mentioned 2020, I mentioned that there were 100,000 people in Hollywood. This is also in Hollywood. I don't remember if you saw that. But things have been building up for decades. Things have been building up all over the world. The global majority is like looking to us to start fighting in every way that we can so that they can also rise up. Because the beautiful thing about capitalism being a global system is that it's a global system, right? We have the entirety of the working class with us. They're fighting alongside us. This is a generational struggle. This is a generational, geographical, historical struggle that has been fought. And they're giving it to us. They gave us all their knowledge. They've been pushing this wheel forward. We're not reinventing the wheel. We don't have to create something out of nothing. We have comrades like Fred Hampton and the Black Panthers. We have comrades like Ho Chi Minh and the People's Liberation Army. We have comrades like the Popular Front for the... Thank you. How can I mess that one up? That's crazy. But we have to be able to look at these scientifically, right? We learned a little bit about historical materialism. We have to have a scientific view on what right and wrong is. If you're looking and you're talking to somebody who doesn't know anything about the history of Israel or Palestine, and they're talking to a Zionist and they're crying, they're going to go, oh my gosh, those are the good guys. That's so sad. The terrorists, the terrorists. If you're talking to somebody from Palestine and they're crying about how they've been bombed and starved and forced out of their generational homelands, you're going to be like so confused, right? That's why I said, imagine being a liberal. Imagine being a liberal, just like, who do I believe? They're both crying, right? We have science. We have empirical evidence. We have 4K video. We have to stop relying on these like loose ideas that the capitalists try to have us believe in, this idea of good versus evil. There is a science to what can happen. Bye, guys. Thank you. There is a method in which we can find which side we're on, right? And we're on the side of the workers. We're on the side of humanity. We just have to try. And there's various ways that you can resist. There are so many different types of people who have martyred themselves for this movement. There are movements and organizations here in Los Angeles that are fighting for workers and fighting for tenants. But I want to leave you with like a little funny meme because I want to remind you that this isn't just a fight that we do. This is our responsibility. This is our responsibility. So I'm going to leave you this meme going way back to 1870. It's a little blurry, so I'll read it to you. But communists or working class people in 1870 were like, I just finished reading Das Kapital between shifts at work. I started to recognize and see my own oppression. Communists in 1905, they overthrew the Tsar, set up a Soviet Moscow, which is a workers' council, and seized a battleship. In 1920, tomorrow I will march through 20 degrees snow in Siberia to face the armies of the Tsar and all the imperial powers of the world. Because after the workers won, France, Germany, UK, all the heavy hitters of colonialism, white supremacy, sent everything they had to try to destroy that. It's crazy. In 1935, tomorrow I will march thousands of kilometers through the Shangji Mountains to keep the Chinese Revolution alive. They were fighting a civil war themselves, and after a century of humiliation by the white colonial powers. In 1945, the Nazi Empire has been destroyed, and we have brought peace to Europe. The Soviets lost 27 million people in that war. They made the greatest sacrifice, and guess who gets to say that they won World War II? It's the United States. Cowards. In 1949, we have built a united China and ended the decades of violence and banditry. In 1965, Vietnam had 3 victories. 3 victories. We beat the Japanese that were colonizing them, then they beat the French, and now we will beat the Americans to liberate Asia once and for all. They beat them 3 times. Communists in 1975 in Africa. I just broke free of our colonial occupiers. Tomorrow I will liberate the rest of Africa from colonial overlords and their puppets. They're still fighting today. We've got comrades in Burkina Faso and Mali and in Niger that are working to build Africa up from the ground without the West, without France. It's crazy. We too used to be like you, and one day you will be like us. Our legacy lives in you, comrade, and we have left you all of the tools you need to finish the revolution and bring about the final victory for the working class, to create everlasting peace and freedom. 100 generations lives in you. Do us proud. So we have to ask ourselves, what are we going to do to take on this responsibility? How are we going to fight this? It doesn't come from posting on Instagram. It doesn't come from believing that things are bad. So a revolution doesn't happen just because people are suffering. I hope everyone knows that. Just because we suffer enough doesn't mean a revolution's automatically going to happen. It takes dedication, it takes organization, and it takes militancy and discipline. So, highly recommend, this is always my little spiel, if you are not part of an organization, join one now. I don't give a fuck what it is. If it's a mutual aid group, if it's a, gosh, let me think, like a national liberation struggle. We've got, like, if you're in the Chinese diaspora, if you're in the Korean diaspora, join a struggle. Start figuring out how to work through problems with people. Start building a community again. We have to start building these networks. All Power Books is connecting with Midnight Books. We're connecting with Matalia Books. We're connecting with parties. We're connecting with mutual aid groups and all these different types of things to build this safety net. So when capitalism falls, we're going to be able to have a group of people that is able to support and sustain ourselves. So, all that being said, do I have a volunteer who wants to read a final quote? It's short. Yes, okay, excellent. Thank you so much.
Let the ruling class tremble at the communist revolution. The proletarians have nothing to lose but their shame.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Round of applause. And we have nothing but a world to win. And it's just crazy not to keep going, but I don't know how to tell you how important it is right now. When studying history, we realize that we are at this peak right now. Fascism has been here. George Jackson has been telling us we need to move, and we are at a disadvantage. We are at the disadvantage that we have Netflix, that we have, you can get ice cream. I forget the quote, but somebody said, we'll never have a revolution because we've got ice cream. We gotta start being able to intervene in our own lives and start making sacrifices. Like I said, no one at All Power ever has been paid any sort of money for the stuff that we do. Actually, I'm supposed to do this. The next one is, if you like what we do, you can always support us through Venmo. We'd love to have you volunteer. If you're interested in volunteering, this class is actually a prerequisite. So you guys all have taken the class. So now you can become a volunteer at All Power Books. I also highly recommend you looking into various political parties, because a party is basically a living memory of struggles before. And what they'll do is they'll be able to target not just one thing. Like if you want to join a tenants union, join a tenants union. But a party will be able to encompass the workers, labor issues, LGBTQ issues, hunger issues, all these things kind of tackled in the same thing. But highly recommend start developing and building your own skills, because the revolution is going to need every single one of us. No matter how small or how young, there's always jobs. I forget who it was. What's that chick's name? She was an actress. She was really pretty from the 1940s. Audrey Hepburn. When she was little, she used to go against the Nazis and carry shit in her lunchbox, like little notes and stuff back and forth. We're going to need everybody, right? So thank you guys so much for coming here. I really hope that this has inspired you to be able to make a change in your own life and start organizing and taking that seriously. I know that once you start going against capitalism, there's so much to learn. You need to learn economics, you need to learn geopolitics, geography. Not only do you have to learn US history, but also the history of China. Everyone's going to ask you about China. Everyone's going to ask you about the Soviet Union, Russia, all these things. So you do have to start educating yourself. But that's an investment in our movement, right? And like I said, we can look to all of our heroes and martyrs of before. We cannot let the people of Palestine die and not do nothing. And I know we all feel like that, and I know it's alienating, and I know it's hard, because what even can we do? What does my voice matter, said 6 billion people, right? So let's get organized, let's fight this shit, and let's get serious. Let's not rely on ideas or beliefs about things. Let's find a scientific, structured way and disciplined way to move forward to the next step. Thank you guys so much for coming. Have a wonderful night. Yes, we put everyone to work. Also, I have this for when you guys are done with that. If you guys want to join our volunteer pool, this is the link, but we use an app called Band. It's like an organizing app. So if you want to be a volunteer, download the Band app, and then we'll put you in a chat. There is one more step after joining this. You'll have to take a volunteer orientation. That's where I go way more into Marxism, Leninism, and what we do and all our, blah, 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 blah.